Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Jim Knowles leaving Ohio State, going to Penn State. From an outside perspective, a little bit of a head scratcher. Now, many of the Ohio State fans, y'all know what time it is. Defensive coordinator, hot board. And Dill, I think the fascinating part about this conversation, everybody's going to pick up the phone. You know, if you are Ohio State, if you're Ryan Day coming off a national championship, you know this defense from a talent standpoint going to be just fine in 2025. There's nobody in the contacts of Ryan Day that he can't call and he won't get an answer to. That's what excites me the most. Now, I think secondly, I want to say this, but both things can be true. You know, Jim Knowles did a very good job at Ohio State. I mean, he took over and just maximized this defense in 2024. It was, bar none, the best defense that we saw in the country. It can sting to lose Jim Knowles, but on the flip side, Ohio State's going to be just fine. I think both things can be true. I opened up Twitter. I opened up the message boards, Ohio State fans saying Jim Knowles wasn't even that good. Like, I think we can recognize that Jim Knowles was very good. But Ohio State, they're going to grab a good defensive coordinator, and they're going to be just fine on defense. It's about the Jimmies and Joes, and Ohio State's got plenty of those heading into 2025. Now, I want to get into, I think, some names that pop up immediately. Before we get into it, as always, Ohio State fans, let it fly in the comment section. It's going to be an exciting next couple of weeks in terms of see how this process shakes out. Would love to hear some more names that the boys don't talk about. That's probably how we're going to kind of structure the conversation over the next couple of weeks. Of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Dill, without further ado, let's start with what could make the most sense for Ohio State. That's hiring from within. Matt Guerrieri seems to be the most popular name. Ryan Day shouted him out. And Dill, look, I ain't no Dabo Swinney. I'm not just a hire within because you can. But in Ohio State's case, it might make sense. One, it sounds like Ryan Day really likes Matt Guerrieri. And I think secondly, if you are Ohio State and you're looking at this program going into 2025, continuity is not a very bad thing. This is a guy that has worked under Jim Knowles. I think would have no problem continuing to run the defense that they ran in the 2024 year. If you're Ryan Day in Ohio State, how do you feel about hiring from within and grabbing a guy like Matt Guerrieri as your next defensive coordinator?
And Ryan Day would know better than anyone else because obviously
Agreed.
From the outsider standpoint, co-defensive coordinator at Indiana the year before, we've never really seen him run the show of like an Ohio State-like program, if you will, on that side of the ball. So Ryan Day will certainly know better than anyone else, but like I do get the sense that praise that he kind of delivered makes me think that yeah, Ryan Day knows he's got something. And frankly, I don't know what the bidding war was like with Jim Knowles, but maybe he was comfortable kind of staying where they were and being like, all right, well, I mean, there's a limit to what we'll pay Jim Knowles to be our defensive coordinator because we have a guy that we're kind of comfortable. Frankly.
And the other name that if we're going to stick with hiring from within, Tim Walton, and I mean, you look at Tim Walton, he does have defensive coordinator experience both at the NFL and collegiate ranks, has been awesome at Ohio State, specifically on the recruiting trail. Look, there's a few options within this Ohio State program. If Ryan Day views continuity as a very important decision maker in terms of who's the next defensive coordinator, I think you got two really good options with Matt Guerrieri.
If they elevate Matt Guerrieri, I feel like that does put a little pressure on the Tim Walton relationship, I would have to think. And I don't know where Tim Walton would stand with that, but like I look at kind of being the senior guy in that defensive room, if you will. Like they'll have to probably fight to keep Tim Walton if they're going to elevate Guerrieri in front of them. And that's like, again, that's like you still got to name your best coach, but I look at how valuable Tim Walton's been recruiting that position. Like they've done it as well as anyone by far in the country, I'd say. So he's a coach you certainly want to retain, and elevating Matt Guerrieri, I do wonder how that kind of dynamic plays itself out because I could see Tim Walton being a little stung by it.
Yeah, if you're Ryan Day, you have that conversation with Tim Walton too. You know, and you try to, because you don't want to lose Tim Walton. Tim Walton's been very, very good for Ohio State, not only in terms of player development, but what he does on the recruiting trail. Brian Hartline gets talked about in terms of what he does as a recruiter. They ain't many better in the country than Tim Walton. All right, Dill. Now we get a chance to be a little bit more sicko here and look at some outsiders that could be added. Okay, I got a hot take. I'll start off with a hot take right off the bat. Phil Parker, right? You jump on pretty much every defensive coordinator search that we've seen the last couple of years. Phil Parker's one of the top names on the board. Now, he stayed in Iowa City for a very long time with Kirk Ferentz. He's an Ohio guy. Look, Phil Parker stayed in Iowa City. I don't think he's had Ohio State calling his phone, though. And so if there's a program that could maybe pull him from Iowa City, I certainly think it could be Ohio State. Here's my hot take, though. This is not a knock on Phil Parker. He's done a great job at Iowa for a very long time. One of the best DCs in the game. Is he the right guy to maximize this Ohio State defense? Got to look at what he does with Iowa, and it's like, hey, we're going to play really, really disciplined football. We're going to be very hard to penetrate. We're going to play that cover two better than anybody else. But I look at Ohio State's defense. I look at Iowa's defense. Ohio State just, to be quite frank about it, different caliber dudes. Is Phil Parker the right defensive coordinator to maximize what Ohio State can be on the defensive side of the football? That's probably the question that I have regarding Phil Parker.
See, and I certainly get that, but I do feel like you probably could have said a similar thing about Jim Knowles, who never really coached at the premier ranks of college football, if you will.
Yeah, but you knew Jim Knowles would maximize it because Jim Knowles was aggressive and he wants to be creative. Like, I look at Phil Parker.
Yeah,
now, the flip side of this conversation is, what can Phil Parker do with an Ohio State defense? So like there's two sides to it. I look at it and say, one, I don't know if he's leaving Iowa City. I think number two, to me, the fit seems weird, but I would like to hear from the Ohio State fans because that one I think is an interesting one, but he's probably not my number one choice.
I mean, for a pure developer of defenses, though, like I wouldn't be upset with having him at Ohio State because I look at how much he gets out of what Iowa gives him, which is like a roster that is miles away from where Ohio State's at. I would be interested to see it, but you are probably right. Like that. I mean, he'd probably have to coach different or coach quite a bit different, I should say, because you don't want to play that style of ball at Ohio State.
And then can you teach an old dog new tricks? Is probably another question you have to ask. And this is not me. I'd be an idiot if I got up here and was like an anti-Phil Parker guy. No, I'm certainly not. The fit seems kind of interesting. All right, though, this is probably going to be the craziest one I'll get, and then we'll dial it back in here. Look, Ryan Day did something very similar 12 months ago. Look, you hop on some Wisconsin message boards. You hop on Twitter. I mean, like, there are people who want Luke Fickell gone. Luke Fickell's looking at it and saying, hey, maybe I didn't have access to the resources that I thought I was going to have when I jumped ship to Wisconsin. It's clearly not going great for Luke Fickell up in Madison. The hot seat conversations are happening. Does Luke Fickell say, hey, maybe I'll just press reset, go take over the Ohio State defense, dominate for a couple of years, and then maybe go find another Power 4 program to take over in a couple of years? I'm just floating it out there because we did – I mean, like, right off the bat, you're like, that's crazy. Luke Fickell ain't coming to Ohio State. Well, we just saw Coach Kelly do it 12 months ago. How are we feeling about Luke Fickell?
In certainly slightly different situations, because I think Luke Fickell's still in that like chase mode, if you will.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You can pretty much tell Chip Kelly is no longer in that mode, if you will.
Yes, agreed.
But I do look, you're kind of right. Like if I'm Luke Fickell and I like, does he think he can get this Wisconsin team to be a 10-win team consistently in the new era of the Big Ten, where there isn't a division in Iowa or Wisconsin, I should say, has to play the likes of Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, those teams, Oregon more consistently? I might be looking at it, be like, look, I'll maybe go take the Ohio State coordinator job, get myself back into like the real preeminence, if you will, and then go look for Florida or Ole Miss or just a bigger, better job. Because you're right, Wisconsin. I mean, I think Luke Fickell is an incredible coach. Where he's been, he's always been super successful. And I think I personally would have thought Wisconsin was a better job, but it doesn't feel like it's a great job right now. So.
Yeah, it feels like he just doesn't got the guys up there, man.
I don't think he'll be 6 to 8 wins consistently, and that's not good enough to elevate himself.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll give you the reins next. Coordinator that you think Ohio State should pick up the phone and dial.
I think Pete Golding at Ole Miss would be a very interesting one, and the reason I kind of look at it is I don't think he had a great showing in Alabama for sure.
But it wasn't bad though. Like that, he gets way too much flack.
Sure. I kind of agree. Like it wasn't bad, but he didn't kill it at Alabama. But the way he's coaching Ole Miss, the way he's got that defense playing in 24 where that was a smothering defense, and it didn't have the talent. It was a good defense for sure. It didn't have Ohio State talent. It didn't have
pretty
Georgia
dang close, if we're being honest. Ole Miss
but like
defense within the portal.
Secondary is like miles away from where Ohio.
Yeah,
their
fair.
defensive line was really good this year, and that certainly helped. But they don't have the talent.
Okay, so you said something I agree with, and so I'm working on not cutting you off. I'm working on it. Smothering defense. I think that's what Ryan Day is looking for. Like, gone are the days where Ohio State wants to just win in shootouts. Like, what has made Ohio State the very, very good football team over the last couple of years? Yes, they've had good offenses. They have one this year too. The defense was not only good, it was dominant, it was smothering, and Pete Golden played that way at Ole Miss. You talk about Ole Miss and what made them a dangerous team. It started on the defensive side of the football. Make no mistake about it. I think
you look at the TFL numbers they were putting up against some teams, like really, really impressive. And again, I thought his ability to get the most out of a guy like Suntrain Perkins, like that's a little bit of a deep cut. But if you're watching Ole Miss and you saw his progression, you saw some other guys in that defense really kind of elevate themselves.
Yeah.
I think he did a really good job at Ole Miss. I think he's a guy you worth taking a look at.
Yeah, 100%.
I think he'd frankly take the job at Ohio State.
Yeah, I think he would too, because he looks at it and say, all right, like, am I going to have that elite caliber defense I had in 2024? Am I going to have that every single year? I don't know. Like, can you reload in the transfer portal every year like Ole Miss needs to? I'll give you one more name. Where are you looking at here?
I mean, Glenn Schumann at Georgia would not stun me if they kick the tires on him, because the only reason, like, again, I know Georgia's a great job. I'm not sure he'd necessarily want to leave, but it feels like his career, I don't want to say is stalled out a little bit, but you don't have the same buzz and the energy around what he's doing. Like Dan Lanning, when he took over for him, it was like, okay, I'm going to be here for 2 years, and then I'm going to go get the Florida job or the Auburn job or whatever other job pops open. Right now, that the energy around him is not quite there. The energy around Georgia, frankly, I don't know. Are they going to be a great team next year? I don't know. I look at what they have. They'll probably be in the top 10, but they're not like a shoe-in title favorite, if you were.
It feels stale. It feels stale.
And he'll also always struggle to get the credit for that defense because Kirby Smart always hogs some of it, and they're just also not playing the same defense they were a couple years ago.
I agree. The Glenn, and he's a great defense. It just feels stale there. And like you go back 12 months ago, seemed like even for head coaching jobs, Glenn Schumann was getting brought up, and you didn't hear any Glenn Schumann rumors with head coaching jobs over the last couple of weeks and months with this coaching cycle.
But a really smart mind, really good recruiter. I think a change of scenery might be good for him. It'd be good for Ohio State possibly too.
And Ohio State's trying to go into the southeastern United States and grab dogs. Glenn Schumann can help you do that. I'll give you two more before we get out of here. Okay, so real quick, Brian Haynes, Indiana. I love him, but it sounds like Indiana's going to keep him. They just extended him like 3 hours ago. Now, could Ohio State go and get him if they wanted to? Maybe. But I wouldn't rule it out. But we'll see about that. I'll table that conversation. Jim Leonard is a really popular name. And, Dill, the thing with Jim Leonard is you've seen his name get similar to Phil Parker. Like every defensive coordinator search, hey, Jim Leonard is coming up. We've talked about him a lot. Hasn't really wanted to – he's been picky, it sounds like. You know, he's up with Denver right now. Okay, you're picky. You're waiting for the right spot, buddy. I don't know if you're getting a better like this. This is as good as it gets. If you want to come back down and be a DC and potential head coach in the next 5 years, Ohio State's that spot, and we know what he can do as a defensive coordinator. Last one, a little bit more of a risky one, but Travis Williams at Arkansas, energy, what he do on the recruiting trail. I think he's doing everything he can with an Arkansas defense that is definitely undermanned in the SEC. That would make a lot of sense as well. Out of Brian Haynes, Travis Williams, Jim Leonard, what's your favorite option there?
I'm a Travis Williams guy.
I knew you.
You would have like 2 years ago. It probably would have been Leonard, but there is some oddness around the fact that he hasn't like gotten himself back into the real big leagues, if you will, of football. Like I feel like that like 3 years off now of like popping around of like these nothing jobs. He's
the defensive backs coach. He's like NFL position coach, but I do agree.
There's been some big jobs that I feel like have popped open, and it's like, why aren't you taking them? Are you getting offered? It's kind of odd.
I'm kind of with you. It's like, okay, are you waiting for the right spot, or are people just not on the Jim Leonard train anymore? I'm kind of with you. I like Travis Williams. I'd take Brian Haynes if available. Look, to me, I'll close it out on this. I would hire from within. It's really fun to talk about some new names. This Ohio State defense was so freaking good in 2024, and it felt like it finally clicked, like what Jim Knowles wanted to do. It was always good, but you felt like there were some growing pains. Like Jim Knowles has a little bit of a complicated defense where you have to understand and master before you can go out, play fast and physical and dominate. Felt like in 2024 that was like it clicked. Matt Guideri is probably just going to click back with you in 2025. So to me, I'd hire from within, but at the end of the day, look, Ohio State ain't going to have a shortage of options, and we'll see what names emerge over the next couple of days and weeks. We'll probably get a feel if this was expected or not in terms of the pace of the hiring. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Ohio State fans, let it fly in the comment section. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.